1, they're blocking the street. 1700 block Massachusetts Avenue Northwest. Wagon 3, you head up that way. Code 73, we have a report of 2 cars overturned in Connecticut and Calvert, 6:06 a.m. Any unit in the area of Dupont Circle, they're placing barricades on New Hampshire Avenue.
Report of 1,000 at Mount Vernon Park, 6:08 a.m.
Attention all units, tear gas is now being used in the area of 34th and Prospect Northwest. Cruiser 614, Scout 97, and Scout 101, a large group at Dupont Circle. Any unit in the area for an injured officer, Wisconsin, that area. Okay, Cruiser 607, you have it. Scout 81, Cruiser 619, you have another large group at Dupont Circle, blocking the street.
Connecticut and R. Robert. Any unit for a large group at 34th and Prospect. Any unit for a large group at 34th and Prospect.
This was the Spring Offensive. The mobilization of masses of people at a given time and place attracts worldwide news coverage and attention. For the protest organizer, inciter, and promoter, it is a vital and necessary tactic. On April 24th, 1971, the National Peace Action Coalition, supported by welfare rights groups, labor unions, and others, held a massive demonstration in Washington, D.C. Some 175,000 people from all walks of life, with differing ideologies and purposes, marched from the White House to the Capitol. Washington has grown accustomed to this method of voicing dissent. Though larger than most, this was an organized demonstration with parade permits, marshals, and responsible leadership. The demonstrators came. Their positions on the war, racial discrimination, and other political issues were made known. Throughout the rally, officers of the Metropolitan Police were directed to maintain a low visibility profile. Their role was, as always, to protect the constitutional rights of citizens, intervening only to meet unusual or emergency situations. There were few laws broken, few arrests. Most who came in the name of peace returned to their homes, jobs, or schools. But some who came to break the peace stayed on in West Potomac Park. For them, the April 24th rally was only a prelude to Mayday, an opportunity to advance their own well-defined aim, to shut down the federal government.
The country should respond from coast to coast with demonstrations at universities and communities and across this country.
Months before, these militant and violence-prone members of the New Left decided that the style, discipline, and tactics of peaceful assembly were no longer acceptable. As early as June 1970, strategy conferences were held by radical leaders in Milwaukee and Ann Arbor. Here, a new tactic was adopted: massive civil disobedience and confrontation. Instead of large crowds peaceably assembling to petition their government, activity would move to unlawful direct action. Stop the government, paralyze the judicial system, challenge law enforcement, and embarrass the establishment. A detailed 24-page tactical manual was printed and distributed across the country. Prepared by the Mayday Collective of the People's Coalition for Peace and Justice, it scheduled 10 days of massive civil disobedience between April 26th and May 7th to take advantage of the planned April 24th march. Early disruptive activities focused on the Selective Service, Health, Education, and Welfare, Internal Revenue Service, and the Justice Department. In each action, the tactics varied, but the objective was the same: to disrupt the government. On Tuesday, April 27th, Mayday action called for demonstrators to obstruct entrances to the Selective Service Building. When federal employees refused to be intimidated, demonstrators turned to less violent forms of protest. Money and draft cards were burned. The national anthem and the American flag were made a mockery. The next morning, Maydayers again took up their positions at employee entrances. Police ordered them to disperse. Those that did not were taken into custody, leaving behind only their traces of trash and litter. Although rain canceled Wednesday's march on the Internal Revenue Service, the Mayday Collective joined demonstrators at the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare on Thursday. When they were refused access to the entire building, they ripped down a large retaining wall and later attempted to march on the White House. Again, police ordered the crowd to disperse. Again, those that did not were methodically arrested. In each action, recognized organizations such as the Quakers, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, National Welfare Rights Organization, and others played a role in the agenda planned by the Mayday leaders. On Friday, Mayday leaders unveiled a new strategy at the Department of Justice. Demonstrators moved in waves to block entrances. The manual instructed units of 10 to 25 people to sit down and pass the pipe and play music until arrested. As each unit was broken up or arrested, another wave took its place. The tactic was designed to test the ability of police to handle arrests of large groups. But the action failed. Police utilized field arrest reports on the scene to facilitate booking procedures. That afternoon, Southern Christian Leadership members, acting under a parade permit authorized by the city, were joined by more Mayday demonstrators at the Justice Department. When the permit expired, the police command was given to disperse. Those who refused to leave were arrested. From April 26th to April 30th, Metropolitan Police arrested over 1,000 lawbreakers. Each was properly processed, collateral or personal bond was posted, and the demonstrators released. Many would be arrested again in other Mayday demonstrations. During this period, the West Potomac Park campsite became the command, communications, and training center for all Mayday activities. Initial Mayday tactics called for headquarters in Rock Creek Park, a rugged, wooded 1,700-acre park that runs through the heart of Washington. Recognizing the surveillance and logistics problems with such a site, the Departments of Justice and Interior limited their assembly permit to the more confining West Potomac Park area. Although the permit prohibited camping, the Mayday Manual advised people to bring tents, blankets, food, and communication equipment. The list of essentials also included wire cutters for fences, water bottles for tear gas, and dope to share with fellow demonstrators. By early Saturday morning, May 1st, armies of blue denim and khaki had streamed into West Potomac Park. Collegians, hippies, and high school students, professional freaks with their drugs, and well-heeled agitators with pamphlets and newspapers. Subsequent investigations and arrests showed 75% of the participants came from outside the Washington area. Some came for a widely publicized weekend marathon rock festival. Some came to get high. Some came for some action. And some came to stop the war. During the rock festival, hundreds of cases of drug overdose and excessive drinking were reported. A mobile unit set up to disseminate drug information quickly turned into an emergency treatment center. The attending physician personally treated over 600 narcotics cases. By midday, police aerial surveillance indicated the crowd had grown to over 25,000. Early evening photos showed 45,000 had spilled over the confines of the park, posing health hazards and threatening the destruction of public property. These repeated and flagrant violations of the park permit, which was negotiated and accepted by the Mayday leaders, left no alternative but for the government to close the campsite down. It was up to Chief Wilson to execute the revocation, a singularly challenging and delicate assignment for the men of the Metropolitan Police Force. At 4 a.m. Sunday, all members of the department were mobilized for a top-secret pre-dawn trip to West Potomac Park. At 6 a.m., the announcement was made to the slumbering and surprised crowd that their permit had been revoked and they must vacate the area or face arrest.
Grounds are now unlawful. Everyone on the grounds must leave as soon as possible. Those who do not leave the area are in violation of the law and will be arrested. All those wishing to leave the area and avoid arrest will be given time to do so. You may leave the grounds.
The Mayday Manual had counseled the demonstrators to maintain communication, prevent panic, and not allow themselves to be chased out of town. Instead, the opposite happened. The demonstrators offered almost no resistance.
Attention, attention. This is the Metropolitan Police Department. Be advised that the purpose for this demonstration...
No one has permission to remain until noon. Everyone is supposed to be leaving now.
So what you're saying is that you may begin to arrest people now if they do not move on. Is that it?
This is possible, but not probable. It's still only 10:25, so we won't be arresting for some time.
Within hours, nearly 45,000 youths were cleared from the campsite. Most who left the park also left the city. Others who might have stayed for Monday's planned demonstration scattered to all parts of the district. In all, only a handful of hardcore militants who remained in defiance of Chief Wilson's order were arrested at the park.
Why don't you get off your phony eyelashes and falsies and your girdle? Take off your girdle and your false eyelashes and your false tits. You're a pig. Stop filling me up, you faggot woman. Faggot woman.
What's your name, miss?
None of your business, asshole. You are all fucking pigs. All of you.
The 15,000 demonstrators who remained in Washington were joined by several thousand more militants for the following day's traffic stopping action. Monday's tactics called for massive civil disobedience at 21 selected targets. Targets were broken into two areas, traffic circles and the bridges. Mayday leaders felt if these were blocked during early morning rush hours, government business would be stopped.
We're going to see to it that the thousands of government workers who have a right to go to work peacefully are not interfered with by those militants, those few militants, who, in the name of demonstrating for peace abroad, presume that they have the right to break the peace at home.
Pre-dawn Washington was quiet.
This is about the best place to start. Okay. And I'll start working on my men. I'll be back very shortly.
The task of keeping the bridges clear of demonstrators was assigned to federal troops, allowing more policemen to be assigned to strategic demonstration targets. At 4:30 a.m., inbound commuter traffic on Washington bridges was heavy but flowing normally as federal employees sought to avoid rush hour disruptions. Then at 6 a.m., police, protesters, and commuters converged. 1,000 demonstrators blocked Dupont Circle. 1,000 swarmed onto Washington Circle. Over 1,000 more hit Georgetown. Some sat in busy intersections taunting police. Some threw trash or slashed tires. Others pushed cars into the street, alarming innocent bystanders. The brunt of these early morning clashes was borne by district police. The tactical pattern was to first send in scooter and motorcycle officers to evaluate the situation, then send in patrolmen and buses to scatter and arrest protesters. The military followed up to maintain security. Despite sporadic blockages, the major traffic arteries were kept open as police responded with tear gas to drive the demonstrators off. During this critical period, police maintained normal booking procedures to maximize the potential for successful prosecutions. At 6:23 a.m., Chief Wilson made the decision to discontinue the time-consuming process of using field arrest forms.
Attention.
Violators working in groups were ordered to disperse, to leave the area.
From 19th to 23rd Street, East Street to Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest. This area is closed.
Warnings were given every 2 to 3 minutes by both cruiser loudspeaker and bullhorn. Those that ignored the opportunity were taken into custody without exception. By early afternoon, field arrest forms were reinstated, and arrests totaled over 7,000, the largest single-day arrest total recorded in American history. Our nation's capital does not possess facilities for detaining 7,000 prisoners. No government should stand ready to arrest and detain thousands of people at one time. When the police were forced to take action, they were also forced to use facilities which provided a minimum of security, shelter, and sanitation. This was what the demonstrators wanted. As stated in the manual, it greatly enhances our tactical position if the jails and detention facilities are filled with demonstrators. The specter of thousands of people jailed in the government's unsuccessful attempt to control Mayday will graphically demonstrate the political isolation of the war-making government. Tens of thousands going to jail will make the choices painfully clear to America's rulers: end the war or face social chaos. After demonstrators filled police and court cell blocks and the D.C. jail, police established a temporary holding facility at Robert F. Kennedy Stadium. To force further confrontation, some of the prisoners attempted to escape. Others slashed and mutilated a large tarpaulin covering the field. When it was apparent that bogged-down court procedures would cause detention of many prisoners overnight, they were transported to the Washington Coliseum, a large auditorium nearby. By nightfall, all demonstrators were indoors. Blankets were secured from the military, and more than enough food to take care of the prisoners' needs. Reaction of some prisoners was to destroy the sanitary facilities, tear up the blankets, and throw the food on the floor. Many refused to be properly booked and identified. On Tuesday, with most of their fellow demonstrators under arrest, the remaining Mayday activists employed hit-and-run tactics throughout the morning. About noon, police prepared for a planned march on the Justice Department. Official estimates indicated about 800 protesters would take part. However, these were joined by over 3,000 others who had been released by the courts. Police warned the demonstrators to disperse or be arrested. Most left peacefully, but 1,500 chose to be arrested. Final Mayday action called for a massive siege of the United States Capitol. to hold Congress hostage until it ratified a People's Peace Treaty with the North Vietnamese. By now, 3,000 hardcore radicals were all that was left of a Mayday tribe that had numbered nearly 45,000 5 days before. At 1 o'clock, they mounted the east steps of the Capitol to applaud political oratory against the establishment and the war. Shortly after the speeches, police again ordered the demonstrators to disperse or be arrested. Some 1,200 reacted as the tactical manual dictated. No matter what anyone says, no matter what laws we break, we will not leave our action targets until we have succeeded in creating the specter of social chaos, or until we are arrested. They were arrested. The remaining few who were drawn to Washington by the romance and excitement of the movement vanished. The spring offensive was over. Mayday, with its stated objective of stopping the government, had failed. For both the nation's capital and the Metropolitan Police, it was business as usual. As President Nixon asked, the Metropolitan Police had performed its duties in a professional manner, dealing fairly but firmly with violators of the law, to the end that all citizens who live, work, and visit our nation's capital were afforded protection of the law. But there will be other demonstrations, other crises. As protesters and police alike discovered, there can be no tactical manual for a Mayday. Each incident is unique. Each situation must be individually evaluated and acted upon. For in law enforcement today, the police officer is often the peacekeeper in events involving national and local issues for which he is neither responsible nor empowered to resolve. Yet he remains the crucial pivot around which economic, education, racial, and other issues of the day revolve.